Greetings, citizens of the world. We are Anonymous. We are here to ask a question many of us seem to have forgotten. Where is humanity? Where is the humanity? For too long, we have walked by those who struggle to hold on to life. For too long, we have idled by blindly while people suffer. We close our eyes to people suffering and hardship and think nothing of the man lying on cold stone, as if our hearts were made of the same cold stone beneath him. We humbly ask, what if this was your loved one? What if this was your father, mother, child, or yourself? Each and every one of us could be put into this situation. Think. Whether it's one major medical bill, a missed mortgage payment, a loved one requiring help from an illness, or a fire or other unforeseen disaster, anything can snowball into any one of us being thrust out into the cold. Our uncaring so-called elected officials do nothing but change laws for the worse and create further hardship on those most vulnerable. They declare it illegal to feed our fellow man. They declare it illegal to sleep on the streets when no other option exists. They continue to preach the need for austerity, all while finding enough public money to harass, demean, or incarcerate those of us most greatly affected by their austerity. Through their utter lack of compassion and foresight, they have waged a war on our very right to exist, should we find ourselves in the unfortunate position of no longer being able to pay the fees required of the game they've made. To add further insult, they all pretend they're doing this for our own good. A war has been waged on the least fortunate amongst us. We consider this a war against us all. The homeless are not criminals. The true crime is that during a time where there are more vacant homes than there are home buyers, our governments have created and perpetuated a game where anyone can be homeless. A lack of supplies is not the problem. A lack of will is. We see this war and we know its intent. Our elected leaders will be sitting at home in comfort this winter while people they are meant to serve sit abandoned and forgotten on a cold street. We can no longer sit silent while so many needlessly suffer. Also, the top 1% can continue to exploit the human need for shelter as a means to enrich themselves. This is not an elite world. We are but tenants on this planet for a short time. So we ask again, where is humanity? Where is the humanity in those that allow or support such a putrid, callous, vindictive war? Most importantly, where are you? Both the government and the people have failed the homeless. We as Anonymous declare a state of change. What is a minute, an hour, or a day of your time to spend with us helping the homeless? To all of you who believe that homelessness is a problem that can be addressed, and who know that you have the ability to make a difference, we respectfully call upon you to join us. Any amount of effort you can make is a positive outcome that otherwise would not have existed. No time or effort is too small or wasted. We ask our elected leaders, why do you sit idly by and do nothing at best, or pass mean-spirited laws that take aim at the very dignity of those who are already facing a challenge of life and death, which you've never taken 5 seconds to even imagine? Why do you waste our resources in life by making it illegal for any of us to sleep on the streets when it's your austerity and greed that put us there? We call on you to join us and rejoin humanity. Anonymous has faith in people. We have seen humanity. Humanity exists within us all. We call on you to join us. There is still time to find your humanity. We are Anonymous. We are humanity. We do not forgive. We do not forget. The homeless can expect us.
The microphone on for the live stream now and shut the rest down. So, hi, evening and welcome, folks. We are live in the hive with AnonUK TV, our first show. So, don't flame me down if I screw it up. I am trying my best. I'm not the best tech-minded. Tonight we have with us attorney at law Stanley Cohen. Is that correct? Did I pronounce that correctly?
You've got it.
Excellent, excellent. So I'm just going to turn my levels up a little bit just to make sure I've got me levels right here because I am new to this and right, that's it. Yes, and we've also got Top with us and Schism.
Hi. Evening, guys. How's it going?
Right, excellent. Right, excellent. So everybody's here. Hopefully everything's working fine. So I've got enough. My computer seems to be managing it fine. So that okay. We're good to go then, guys. I think.
Excellent.
Excellent. Crack on then, Top.
We have Stanley Cohen with us this evening. Stanley, welcome. It's an honour to have you on the show. Thank you very much for joining us.
It's an honor to be invited, especially for your first show like this. And a hearty shout out to everyone in the UK.
Excellent, excellent. I'd like to first of all, not everyone will know what it is that you're kind of getting up to, what you've been involved with. If you give a brief or detailed beginning, if you like, introduction of who you are.
Well, I am an attorney and an international human rights activist, I've been called, and have spent almost 30 years as a criminal defense attorney, and largely most of the last 20 years involved in political cases, probably more so-called terrorism cases, real and fake, than any other lawyer, certainly in the United States, if not the world. Done a tremendous amount of work in the Middle East, done a tremendous amount of work in the Gulf, in Africa and South Asia, in the United States, and the last several years have become increasingly involved in handling cases involving folks allegedly belonging to that anonymous group known as Anonymous.
I wonder who they are.
Well, it's not me, is it?
I don't know anyone in there. Even my clients, I don't know.
Exactly, exactly. You come to my field of vision, if you like, through the film We Are Legion. How did you come across Anonymous? How did this case kind of like end up in your desk?
Well, I got a phone call from a friend of mine who's a community organizer who said that he had received a phone call from, interestingly enough, apparently Barrett Brown. Before Barrett went to jail for crap, bullshit. And Barrett had indicated that there were a group of folks in the United States whose homes had been raided that day and search warrants executed and laptops seized and computer terminals grabbed. And Barrett was trying to get a hold of me and wondered if my friend had the phone number. And he hooked the two of us up and spoke to Barrett. And the next thing you know, I had agreed to sort of give advice to 5 or 6 of the folks whose houses had been raided and whose computers had been seized and really didn't know where to go and what to do and how to deal with the situation. So spent the next, I guess, 48 hours talking people through, and one of the folks that I ended up speaking with at length was a young woman, a college student. Many people know as I know as Mercedes Hafer from Vegas. And she came to New York a couple of weeks later for some interviews and stopped in to see me for a while, and we talked for a couple of hours, and at the end she said, listen, if I get arrested, will you represent me? And I said to her, if you get arrested? I said, when you get arrested. So I said, sure, I'll represent you, and you know, it must have been premonition, because probably within 3 weeks I got a phone call from her whispering into the phone from a fucking federal detention cell in Las Vegas. She'd been arrested, and I got involved in the case, and you know, the case is almost done. It's ongoing for about 3 years, and over the last 3 years I've directly or indirectly been involved in probably another half dozen different so-called anonymous prosecutions in the United States and overseas.
Absolutely stunning. As I say, you come to my field of vision through the film We Are Legion, which charts the history of Anonymous, if you like. In that film, there was something, you explained something very beautifully, and that was what your thoughts and what your considerations were for DOS. Can you recall that?
Well, sure. Look, I don't see DOS as any different than lunch counter sit-ins in the South in the 1950s. In the 1950s, people, civil rights activists, folks who had enough of the fucking racism in our country and as well as elsewhere decided to try to influence change through economic boycotts, through sit-ins, through counter sit-ins, and in banks as well, where numbers of so-called freedom riders would descend on the South and other parts of the United States, would sit in at counters, and would prevent business from going on as usual. And I don't see DOS so-called attacks, and I don't like calling them attacks, as anything different. The nature of the marketplace has changed. The nature of the struggle has changed. The nature of raising your voice and clenching your fist has changed. And I see DOS as basically, at least within the context of First Amendment activity in the United States, as essentially protected speech. It's not very different than a group of people sitting in the middle of a highway and telling cars, stop. You can't go any further, and here's why we want to stop the traffic. DOS is not very different in that sense, and you've got to keep in mind, government and corporate America, by its very design, has compartmentalized. They've tried to remove the traditional checks and balances. You don't know where they are, generally. You don't know who they are. They don't have offices. Everything is out in cyberspace. There's no particular corporate headquarters. So by the very nature of society today, it's evolved to a point where the traditional means of expressing your opposition to illegal government and corporate policies, of sitting in at counters, of blocking streets, of locking yourself to the doors, are gone. It's still protected speech. It's still First Amendment speech. It's still expressing your opposition to policies. And that's the way I view the evolution of DOS.
It's an interesting point. I'm just going to jump ahead to the future now from where these cases first originally kicked off. Do you think the US gov's attitude has changed towards DOS compared to the initial fear that was spread and the rapid arrest of the PayPal group?
Well, I think the U.S. government has probably done more DOS attacks than anyone in the fucking world right now, between Cebu and a handful of other government cooperators. It turns out the fucking NSA and the CIA are DOSing everyone in the goddamn world who they view as an enemy. They love it.
Like GCHQ.
Yes, if they're not droning and killing wedding parties, they're now shutting down countries that they have political differences with through people that are using DOS of different levels.
You raised a valid point, because in some of the indictment papers that have been released for certain cases, there are actually DOSed IRC servers for the, I think it was AnonUK, I believe. So yeah, the governments are, I don't know if GCHQ are in fact, but certainly the NSA engaged in that activity.
Well, didn't Snowden mention GCHQ involved with the DOSing down of websites and stuff?
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, GCHQ did DDoS websites.
Yeah.
This is what makes the whole thing a little bit ironic, really. I think, is the fact that they can sit there and they can indict, 14 people for DDoSing PayPal. Then, 2 years later, come out on the news saying they've done it themselves. It's kind of a bit of a kettle calling a pot black, really, or pot calling a kettle black. It just seems a bit ridiculous, and I don't see how they can even go through with these indictments anymore anyway, just a bit pathetic, really.
Well, typically, while PayPal 14 and Anonymous and other groups have used DOS for progressive and enlightened and political change to protect communities, the NSA has turned around and used it to be destructive and to be dangerous, and it's part of their assassination policy, and it's part of their attacks on governments that have been elected, and it's part of their attacks on political leaders and dissidents throughout the world. So with almost predictable ease, the government has very quickly slid from passive, peaceful DOS activity into basically extrajudicial assassination of one level or another.
Oh, for sure. That's what I was going to ask you. You was brought in to initially just advise these guys, etc. How did you see the behaviour of US law enforcement guys against the actual kids and the people that were involved in it? How was Mercedes' treatment?
Oh, it's the 800-pound fucking gorilla in the China shop. It was ridiculous. They listen. what's the use of being a fucking federal agent if you don't get to put the vest on, you don't get to put the hood on, you don't get to kick the doors down, you don't get to, to throw the stun bombs into the fucking room? This is what these guys get off on. So you saw it. It was incredible mass overreaction to protected First Amendment activity. It was designed to terrorize. It was designed to send a message. It was designed to basically take back an area that they didn't control then, can't control now, and will never be able to control. So you saw SWAT teams swooping down all over the United States, kicking in doors in some houses of 13-year-olds that were sound asleep, threatening to shoot animals, intimidating people, breaking doors down, isolating folks, making all sorts of promises, the kind you thought they were going after the HSBC's money laundering conspiracy with the cartels.
Absolutely. So Mercedes was absolutely right then. Some kids on the internet in their basements, they scared the fuck out of the guns, yeah?
Well, now, listen, Mercedes has been described as many things. She's great. The whole crew of the so-called PayPal 14 are great. They're dynamic, they're political, they're committed, they're charismatic, they are selfless. They view themselves as active, and correctly so, as active participants in redefining the world that is not just soon to be, but is now theirs. They are refusing to be a silent, passive participant as forces of corporate and military America continue to define our lives in every way, shape, and form. And the PayPal 14 decided to throw themselves into the machine to stand up against a policy of economic retaliation directed against people that had provided an invaluable and, for lack of a better word, very much a patriotic act by exposing criminal and extrajudicial conduct of the United States military and the United States government. The PayPal 14 stepped up, along with thousands of other folks that got involved with the DOS activity. They took a stand, they sent a message, and cyberspace will never again be the same.
No, two shades to that, and amen.
We even have British Anons actually serving time. I think Nerdo was sentenced for part of PayPal as well, wasn't he, over here in the UK? So, I mean, who's to say that the FBI wasn't DOS, that didn't join into the DOS as well of PayPal, just to make matters worse?
Just to bring in a fact, the main DOS, you can get 5,000 kids with an LOIC, but there was actually, I believe, two, according to the reports, two people, or two accounts, shall we say, anonymous online guys, and they brought in botnets. And who's to say who was running those botnets? Could that have been NSA? Who knows? We don't know. It's such a grey area on that, isn't it?
Well, we do know one thing's for sure. The two botnets represented 95% of the DOS on PayPal. No one's ever identified them. I find it interesting that the NSA and the FBI and the CIA and LSD and every other fucking organization in this country was able to basically identify the toilets in everyone's house when they kicked in those doors, but they couldn't go after the two guys or the two women or the two folks that did 90% of the so-called attack, and it makes you wonder why not and who they were.
You just don't know. There was a guy here in the UK, Ryan. He had a botnet that he was went out. He got arrested. He done his time. Can you tell me what the actual charges and what they were charged with, and actually what they were sentenced? Well, the charges were essentially conspiracy to interfere with and to cause economic damage in a certain amount to protected computer devices, which is interesting because the reach of a protected computer device in this country is anything that the government wants it to be. By its very nature, cyberspace is universal. It transcends borders, it transcends countries, it transcends states. So the government can selectively pick and choose when they want to roll this particular statute out, which in theory was designed initially for national security purposes, and which has now evolved to be selectively used at any time they want to do just to fuck with people. So they were charged with a series of felonies, facing essentially 10 to 15 years in jail. At the end of the day,
one case was transferred to another district because that defendant had some charges in another district and they moved it out. And the other 13 ended up pleading guilty to basically illegally accessing a protected computer device to a misdemeanor, which is the lowest gradation of offense in the United States in federal law. If it rolls out the way we expect it will end up, everyone will receive, in essence, a conditional discharge, which means not a day. Well, 2 of the defendants may get 90 days in jail because they chose a plea bargain that included that as an alternative. The other 11 will end up getting basically a conditional discharge. There's a fine of $5,600 in restitution for all 13. Bit of a drop from the $5.5 million fucking dollars that eBay and Pierre said they took a beating on. And they'll go on with their lives and live to fight another day in another battle in other places in other ways.
Yeah, no, I totally hear that. I guess you're fully aware of the campaign for Glenn Greenwald to provide sustenance towards this campaign. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, my client, for one, takes the position that if Glenn Greenwald wrote a check for $80,000 tomorrow, she would burn the fucking thing. And I think that pretty much speaks on behalf of the entire PayPal 14. I can't speak for each of the defendants. There is about to be announced a huge foundation fundraising drive coming out of Germany that we're hopeful will pretty much raise a big chunk of the $80,000. Although there's a fundraising drive underway right now that's raised about $9,000 or $10,000 in the last couple of weeks. Anons and friends and supporters and activists and just good folk from all over the world are sending pennies and dollars and $100. And I suspect at the end of the day, the $86,000 will be paid in full. And look, Greenwald, I get a kick out of this. Greenwald and Pierre and the whole crew, the hip Rupert Murdochs, and that's what I call them. They turn around, they get, especially Pierre, eBay gets wind a couple of weeks before the disposition is reached that there are misdemeanors coming down and de minimis fines, and all of a sudden eBay, which prosecuted the PayPal 14 and which has prosecuted other defendants, both Anons and not, for various federal offenses in the United States and offenses overseas, all of a sudden becomes enlightened and progressive, and they want to cry or they're misunderstood and give them misdemeanors. And not long thereafter, the $50 million, $100 million, $250 million announcement comes out that there is this new hip, cool alternative to Rupert Murdoch media outlet coming out through the very people that were responsible for prosecuting the PayPal 14, for complaining to the United States government, and perhaps some believe even lying to the United States government because they filed Security and Exchange Commission affidavits, sworn declarations that said they didn't lose a penny. Their spokespeople said they didn't lose a penny, and the next thing you know, they lost $5.5 million. So I don't think that the PayPal 14 are looking for any intervention from corporate America, from any government, and are very comfortable with the world community pitching in to help to deal with this collective effort and to resolve this restitution, for lack of a better word, collectively.
Yeah, being the political idealists that we all are, I'd probably take the same path, to be honest. There's lots of support, there's lots of goodwill and gesture from a lot of the people that I speak with for the PayPal 14. In part, because of the film that everyone's watched, We Are Legion, I keep coming back to that, but also in part for the work that yourself has done. The payback 13, they were dealt differently, and I've questioned you on this before. What do you see the difference in the two cases there?
Well, the major problem with the Payback 13 is I think the Department of Justice was very disappointed with the way we ripped apart the case in Northern California. And, the Payback 13 is in the Eastern District of Virginia. The Eastern District of Virginia has traditionally and historically been the enforcement mechanism for the Department of Justice. It's extraordinarily conservative. It's extraordinarily fascist. It's extraordinarily controlled. It's close to the Department of Justice. Most of the judges are extremely conservative. The sentences upon conviction that are handed down are extraordinarily draconian. Cases go to trial extremely quickly. There's not a lot of flexibility. It is the district in the United States that is designed to punish and to enforce the political doctrine of the Department of Justice. So I suspect that the Department of Justice ended up seeing what was going on in Northern California, realized that they didn't have the case they thought they had, realized that they were going to end up with a resolution that proved to be a great victory for the PayPal 14, and decided to move the venue to the Eastern District of Virginia, which has been very much the enforcement mechanism for this administration, the Bush administration, and every administration in the last 20 years that has chosen to enforce political orthodoxy and to try to repress speech and to deter political activism.
That's an interesting point I wanted to speak with you on. Over the period of time that you've been dealing with this, what's the changes that you've seen in your interactions with the legal jurisdiction? Well, any case that you've dealt with, do you think it's getting more severe over time? And do you think prosecutorial overreach for Aaron Swartz, for example, do you think there's a trend, and do you think it's going to get worse?
Well, you know, I have been no fan of this administration even before it was an administration. Folks who know me know that I call our president I have a drone. He is a man who has built his entire career on the back of a fraud. He's someone whose resume bespeaks an individual who's never been anywhere long enough to create a track record. He is someone who has done as much or more harm in converting the Department of Justice into a rubber stamp to enforce his political view of this country and this world as any president since Richard Nixon. The Department of Justice increasingly over the last 6 years has focused more and more on whistleblowers, has focused more and more on telling Congress to go fuck itself, has focused more and more, as we now know, in lying to Congress about the NSA, has focused more and more on going after political dissidents, has focused more and more in going after bills that are draconian, such as the NDAA. This is an administration which swept into power, claiming to be a breath of fresh air, which has turned out to be wedded in not just the old school, but has brought it to new depths, that has brought it to new heights of danger, that has singled out, in particular, political movements, political groups, and those people that are willing to play the role or serve the role as whistleblowers.
Yeah, again, it's I can't disagree with you there. I was caught up in the hope message that was given out from the first black president of the US and all the rest of it, but the actual timeline, it hasn't changed from Bush really much, has it? If anything, it's got worse as technology has progressed. Do you see any way to that this can be turned back?
Well, look, I think you're absolutely right. I think, you know, there have been several thousand people that have been killed extrajudicial assassination by drone attacks. This is an administration that has, I don't know, 1,000 military outpost bases all over the world. It's an administration that doesn't hesitate to send forces at the drop of a hat. It's an administration that is still completely wedded to supporting blindly Zionist expansionism and genocide directed at Palestinians. It is an administration that is almost desperately seeking to focus on political activists. At the same time, it ignores Wall Street. So when you ask me about the timeline, I mean, I don't know what's coming up, but, you know, perhaps Hillary Clinton. I'm actually, though, in a strange sort of way, having said what I just said, optimistic. And I'm optimistic because of my work with both Anonymous and Occupy Wall Street and other movements in the Middle East and other movements in Europe, where there are more and more and more young women and men that are taking to the streets, that are taking to the airways, that are setting up alternative means of getting the message out, that are taking stances, that are willing to sacrifice, that do not want to be passive participants, that do not want to sit on the sidelines as the world that is theirs to take continues to be crafted by people from my generation or from this president's generation. So I'm optimistic. I think if you take a look at movements throughout the world, increasingly they're challenging authoritative regimes. If you take a look, the whole evolution of cyberspace freedom has exposed this administration and other administrations worldwide to scrutiny in ways that are unprecedented. The ability to maintain the secrecy, the veil of secrecy that's puffed up and kept these governments in power forever has begun to crumble. More and more whistleblowers are willing to step up and take a chance. More and more people are beginning to communicate with each other throughout the world, recognizing that the notion of borders and anthems and flags is outdated.
I see the guys being flashed up. Sorry, I'm hogging Stanley's time. Feel free to jump in with any questions, guys. I've got loads.
Mate, I was happily listening, and I've got a few questions, but they're a bit further on down the line at the moment. I'm quite interested in how he managed to defend Hamas and stuff like that in the past, coming from the faith that you are yourself. You know, it must be, I mean, obviously you're a professional and you have an obligation to defend. Anybody has a legal right to a proper defense, but still, is that not a conflict of whatever going on, or is that just purely a professional thing, or is it because you believe in Hamas, or is it because what?
I'm not the ACLU. I don't believe in class-based litigation. And although there are many lawyers, women and men, who fight long and hard and often pro bono for free or with limited resources because they believe very strongly in the notion that every person in our system is entitled to the best defense and to his or her day in court, that's not what drives me political. I have done a lot of political work, very controversial political work for many decades. I've represented the head of the political wing of Hamas. I've done other cases for Hamas. I've served as a legal advisor for Hamas. I've done the same at various times for Hezbollah. I did work years ago for the IRA. I've done work for Shining Path. I've done work for the squatter movement. I've done work for the Iroquois, the Mohawk Warrior Society. I do political work based upon two different types of criteria. I either have to identify with the individual as a person, or I have to identify with the politics. And sometimes both happen, and that happened in the case of Hamas. And while the United States still designates Hamas as a foreign designated terrorist organization, Hamas is a national liberation movement. It is the backbone of the resistance in Palestine. It won the election in 2006. I've had the pleasure to know almost all of the original founders and current leaders, many of whom are dear friends who have been murdered. My relationship with Hamas is very special. It's not an issue of Jew. It's not an issue of Muslim. It's an issue of occupation. It's an issue of apartheid. It's an issue of ethnic cleansing. It's an issue of collective punishment. This is an issue that defines our time, our generation, and who we are. Unlike previous generations that stood up and said, I didn't know. I had no idea what was happening in a particular time and place. The whole fucking world knows what's been going on with the Zionist death camps and the Zionist theft of Palestine for the last 66 years. I, for one, will not go silently into the night. Increasing numbers of Jews understand that if we're not going to stand up, then who is? It's our obligation. I don't see it in the context of, and I don't think anyone who knows the battle that's going on sees it in the viewpoint or in the context of a religious issue. It's about land. It's about freedom. It's about 11 million stateless people. It's about 4 million people living under apartheid. It's about another 3 million people living, or 2 million people living under siege right now, not just by Israel, but by its co-conspirators, Egypt and the United States, with regard to Gaza.
So, do you feel that because of what's happening to you, you're being indicted and being threatened to be disbarred for defending these types of people and having a relationship with them, whether it be professional or non-professional. I mean, when Top first told me about it, and I read up about it, and I was like, "You what? How can they actually do that to you when it's your job to defend them? And if you didn't defend them to the best of your ability, you could lose your job anyway. You could be disbarred. So how does that one work for you?"
Well, I'm not viewed by the United States government as your garden variety, very experienced, top-notch criminal defense attorney. The United States government has viewed me, the Department of Justice has viewed me, the Counterterrorism Unit has viewed me as an enemy of this government for many years. It's not just because of the people I represent, it's because of the organizing I've been involved with, it's because of the speaking I've done overseas, it's because of the positions I've taken with regard to the United States and Israel and other Western governments, it's because of the lawsuits I've brought against the United States and Israel. We know, beginning as long ago as 15 years ago, that federal prosecutors and FBI agents started, when they were questioning Palestinian or Arab or Muslim clients of mine, somehow, sooner or later, it turned to Stanley Cohen. Who is Stanley Cohen? What do you know about Stanley Cohen? What can you tell us about Stanley Cohen? Has he ever received money from you? Has he ever passed money from you? Has he ever exchanged information from you, from organizations? What's his relationship to Hamas? I mean, this has been going on for 15 years. And as my practice evolved and spread out with more and more resistance movements in the Middle East, we heard increasingly of inquiries both in the United States and in the Middle East of agents asking about me. So, yes, the United States government believes that everyone is entitled to a vigorous defense. They don't view the vigorous defense as including and exposing the policies of the United States, of challenging the United States, of what they view as embarrassing the United States, of creating political problems in the international community for the United States. They view that in this world and this time as material support for terrorism. In fact, there was an argument in the United States Supreme Court a few years ago, the Humanitarian Law Project, in which an issue was specifically raised, where one of the Supreme Court judges used as an example, suppose a lawyer ghost wrote an opinion piece for a newspaper on behalf of a terrorist organization. Do you think that violates the terrorism laws? And the government said, yes, we do. So the government wants vigorous advocacy, but they don't want advocacy that either exposes its policies, that challenges its legitimacy, or that proves successful in areas of the world where they try to keep a lid on things.
So they just don't want anybody embarrassing them, and they're basically just going to screw anybody over it does, like Bradley Manning and Edward Snowden and basically yourself now as well, because they just don't like what you're doing to them, do they? They don't embarrassment, and that you're actually prepared to have the balls to stand up there and tell them what they're doing wrong, and in a court as well, because that's when they have to face it then, because it's part of public record then, isn't it, if it's in the court?
Well, there's a long history, unfortunately, in this country of trying to criminalize dissent, and it is spread increasingly out towards lawyers and journalists. I am certainly not the first or the last attorney who's been criminalized because of a career of political resistance. The legendary Lynn Stewart was indicted, prosecuted, convicted, and sent to prison. We now have Tony Serra was a famous lawyer, political activist in California. The same thing happened to him. We now have this scandal in which it's been proven that the FBI infiltrated an entire defense camp in Guantanamo Bay. The team of lawyers representing Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, who I was working with in the defense of Suleiman Abu Ghaith and trying to get Khalid Sheikh Mohammed as a witness. We know most recently, in defense of Suleiman Abu Ghaith, there were a number of countries that would not allow me to come to their countries to pursue investigative leads. It's the first time it's happened. I had one representative of a foreign government tell me the United States government told them, don't let Cohen come to your country to work on this case. We've had other countries that kept visa applications indefinitely. So it's very clear that this administration has absolutely no problem in going after not just whistleblowers, but going after those who write about whistleblowers, those who defend whistleblowers, and those who represent the most unpopular. In fact, there was an editorial in a major newspaper in the United States 3 weeks ago calling for an investigation by Congress and the Department of Justice, calling for a panel of independent prosecutors, in essence, to be appointed, so that when there's any allegation involving attorneys that are involved in fighting the Department of Justice, how the fuck can you have the Department of Justice investigating the very people that are fighting them and beating them? How does it happen? You have to have some independent check. My case is replete with evidence of bad faith and misconduct. We know it's going on for more than a decade. We know it went from investigation by the FBI for allegations of material support for terrorism. And when all else fails, you bring in the fucking IRS.
I'd like to ask a question, Stanley. You mentioned Chelsea Manning and Edward Snowden. Was a opportunity presented, shall we say, to represent this?
Well, no. Both cases, there were times where I spoke with lawyers and I spoke with advisors and I offered my opinion about both matters. Look, Chelsea Manning's lawyer did a brilliant job. An absolutely brilliant job. Masterful. You know, going up against the entire fucking intelligence community by himself. He fought day in, he fought day out, he fought the good fight. I'm not sure if there were 300 lawyers that could have done any better. The issue of Mr. Snowden remains to be resolved yet. We don't know where this is going to go. We don't know where it's going to end up. There may very well be a political resolution to this, or there may not. I know some of the lawyers involved in working on his case, and they're very dynamic, and they're very gifted, and they're very committed, and they really know what they're doing.
Again, I can't follow anything you've been saying, Stanley. A lot of the people that are listening are very understanding of what the situation is globally, not just in the US, because you have to understand this is a global issue after the revelations from Snowden, etc. Where do you feel this is going?
Unfortunately, I think it's going to Hollywood. I think you either have to read, it's turning into book 1, book 2, book 3, book 4, movie 5. I mean, the leaks have turned into a drip. And if you want to get access to the information now, you got to go to Anonymous to get the information. Look, Mr. Snowden released some very broad-based information, or had released approximately a year ago. Since then, my understanding is it's all the way up to about 2 to 2.5 to 3% of the information. My concern has always been that years after the fact, we learn that the government represses evidence that exculpates or clears innocent people. We learn not just of government misconduct. We learn not just of government surveillance. We learn not just of government harassment. We learn not just of government violence against dissidents, but we learn that the government represses evidence that can clear individuals who are sitting in prisons, who are sitting in isolation, who are sitting on death row, who are being assassinated by a vicious, illegal drone policy of this government. Who knows how much information is sitting there right now that would not just embarrass the policies of this government and what they're doing in terms of the surveillance state in other states, but would empty prisons throughout the world, perhaps, of persons who have been arrested, persecuted, jailed, and executed for purely political reasons. That's a great concern to me. Now, I understand the concern. We always hear the same old bullshit that you release this information and it poses a threat to national security. I've been doing these cases for 30 fucking years, and I've come across thousands of pages of classified material. Once it's outed in the public, it's on the New York Times website, it's all over the place, WikiLeaks released it, and I've also come across thousands of pages of declassified material. Most of it is silly. Joe Blow tells X, who tells Y, who tells Z, they don't like us. The vast majority of information that is, quote, protected by the security network of this country, that is protected by classification materials, is nothing. It's sitting there, and it's designed to protect the geopolitical agenda of the country. It doesn't threaten anyone. It doesn't endanger anyone. Look, I'm not suggesting material should be released that identify the name, address, phone number, and photos of agents involved in anything anywhere. I'm not suggesting that it be used in such a way to result in physical harm to any individuals. On the other hand, I have this cynical suspicion based upon 25 to 30 years of work in this field that the vast majority of the material is simply classified because it embarrasses the United States government or our allies. Ultimately, this is information that belongs to the public. There's nothing worse than censorship, whether it comes from the government or whether it comes from people who are working with the government to self-censor. And you could read between the lines that last comment.
No, very much so. And I'd like to ask, WikiLeaks has been quiet of late, shall we say, and there's been, I tweeted out the other day, where's your voice, Edward Snowden, where's your voice, Julian Assange? Look, it's gone quiet on those side of things. What do you think's happening with Snowden and Assange at the moment, and what's your thoughts on WikiLeaks?
Well, look, Chelsea Manning sits in prison with a 35-year sentence, and Julian Assange sits in an embassy with Lady Gaga visiting him. And I'm not suggesting that Julian Assange hasn't played an invaluable role for a long period of time in exposing the crimes of governments. Whistleblowing, the release of information, is a very serious business. You're dealing with governments that have no hesitation at putting you in prison for the rest of your life or assassinating you or your children just because they happen to be with you. I think WikiLeaks and I think a number of people involved in whistleblowing right now are making some very difficult choices about where they want to go and what they want to pay and what they're willing to do and not. I think that there is a sort of an industry that is developed right now, and I expect to see it on the red carpet in Hollywood in a year or a year and a half, where whistleblowing is now becoming, on some levels, in some places, selected leaks of information enough to entice people and perhaps to embarrass others, but yet not to really raise the entire wrath of the U.S. government.
That raises another important point as well. With the cases that are going through, etc., with Snowden, etc., the overreach from Cambodia Anons, the US law enforcement are visiting officials in Cambodia, etc., recently and stuff. There's a lot of overbearing pressure on activists. Do you feel that type of pressure on yourself, being a legal representative of those guys that are involved in this type of activity? Do you think it's going to put off legal?
No, I think it's increasing because I think the government has made a decision that this is an all or nothing situation. The government is still, such as, the case of PayPal 14, we did tremendous damage to their case. We did a lot of hard and long work. We took the guts out of the case, enough so that the government made a tactical decision along with us that we were going to dispose of this case in a way that represented the best interest of the collective. I think the government has made a clear decision, this administration has made a clear decision that they are going to make examples out of as many people in as many places as they possibly can. I'm wondering whether, in view of the fact that I guess 4 ministers in the government of China have now been indicted or have now been charged, whether we're going to invade China and rendition them and bring them to the Eastern District of Virginia. Somehow, I doubt it. But I think the government has stepped back and taken a political position that this is serious. This exposes us. This challenges on many levels our legitimacy. It challenges and exposes us in ways that we are politically unwilling to accept. And we're going to go after people. We're going to go after them hard. We're going to go after them in ways which cause great damage to them personally, which cause embarrassment to family and friends, which go after tremendous amounts of resources, and which, to the degree that they can pull it off, try to slow them down. I think that political decision has been made. The Department of Justice has been very clear. It is a major priority for them.
one of the reasons I was very interested to speak with you as soon as possible is once I heard out that there's a possibility of you losing your law license, isn't there?
Well, you know, the resolution in my case is not a crime in New York State. So it doesn't necessarily mean automatic disbarment, but there will be a fight for my license at some point down the road. You know, it's interesting. At one point, a year or two ago, I said to the government, you want my fucking law license, I'll rip it up and throw it at you. You want my citizenship, I'll leave. No, we're not interested in this. We're interested in the pursuit of justice. Yeah, you're interested in it. I know. Citibank and Chase and HSBC and everyone else. And today we learned of another bank involved in billion-dollar tax frauds and money laundering. We know what's going on Wall Street. Nothing happened. Civil settlements. Stanley Cohen, they come after. Okay. It could cost my license, but it won't cost my voice. It won't change my resistance. It won't turn me into something that I'm not. They can jail me. They can never silence me, and most important, they can never take my integrity away.
Amen to that, Stanley. So, what do you think the next steps are on a personal level for you? Are you still going, or can you, in fact, still take on cases that are controversial?
Sure. I have a case that I'm working on, a very controversial case of someone who's been convicted, and there's confinement conditions, a rather renowned Muslim leader. I'm in the middle of a trial. I've got another trial starting in 2 weeks. I've got an appeal coming up of a Somali woman who was wrongfully convicted for material support because she raised $30-some-odd thousand to send to Somali women and children in refugee camps. She got a 20-year sentence for this. I'm still practicing law, and I will continue to practice law. And at the end of the day, if I end up in prison, I'll end up representing inmates in prison free of charge. They're not going to silence me, and the fight goes on.
No, absolutely. Talking of those that are already in prison, you mentioned earlier your initial involvement with Anonymous through Barrett Brown, etc. You've also attended benefit functions for Barrett Brown and Jeremy Hammond as well. Is there any latest that you can provide us on those cases?
Well, Jeremy, unfortunately, his case is done. He waived appeal. Jeremy's got his 10-year sentence. He's going to do approximately 8 hard years. He's got probably, I don't know, 7.5 left. Barrett Brown, you know, they, as his lawyer, you know, mentioned, you know, they took a fucking sledgehammer to a flea. At the end of the day, the Barrett Brown prosecution is about political retaliation. At the end of the day, the Barrett Brown prosecution is about trying to silence someone who was repeatedly serving as a thorn in the side of the U.S. government. At the end of the day, almost all of these cases involve acts of civil disobedience, which involve acts of dissent, which involve acts of speech, which involve acts of passive resistance, do not involve, as the government tries to paint them, theft of money, theft of services, criminal activity as organized crime is commonly known as. Part of the battle is the tension between the government's attempt not just to criminalize resistance, but to turn it into, quote, pure crime. So in my case, the government puts out there that it's an income tax evasion case, which it's not. So in other cases, they accuse people of being involved in certain conspiracies, and they're not. So in the case of Barrett Brown, they accuse him of engaging in a whole host of activities which are perfectly legal. We know what happened to Weave most recently, who spent a year in jail for doing nothing other than speaking up, speaking out, and exposing the policies and practices of corporate America in a completely legitimate way. He spent a fucking year in jail. It took 2 to 3 weeks after the oral argument in front of the Third Circuit for them to throw the case out. The fucking prosecutor, when asked, what did he do, said, I don't know, but he did something. He was convicted. What the fuck does that mean? We have a country that convicts people all the time on the basis of, I don't know, but they did something. Now, Weave is a story of, once again, a young man whose life was disrupted. He was sent to prison for a year, was isolated, was injured, is now fighting back, has now been released, and in fact, I read a very interesting article today. It was great. It was funny, but it was also serious, where he's demanding about $38,000 in recompense in bitcoins from the judge, the federal prosecutor, and the jurors, I believe. And it's great.
Again, it's amazing stuff. On a scale of 1 to 10, where would you put the government position of overreach in the Barrett Brown case because of his work on Project PM?
1 being, one being it's reasonable, and 10 being it's insane.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's 14. I mean, I understand that at one point, there was, Barrett said some things about some overreach by the government directed at his mother. So fucking what? People say things all the time. They are not selectively singled out, although we do know now that recently the former head of the IRS enforcement mechanism was held in contempt by the United States Congress because she wouldn't answer questions about the IRS's admitted policy of focusing selectively on political groups and political dissidents. So when you come to Barrett, and when you come to most of the so-called cyberspace cases, and when you come to the Occupy cases, such as what happened with Cecily in New York this week, and when you come to the material support cases, which literally involve nothing typically but speech, it's the United States government trying to control the playing field. It's trying to limit association, it's trying to limit speech, it's trying to limit information, and it's going after people that pose a challenge to its desire to keep people in the dark and ignorant.
Do you think it's going to work?
No. No, I don't. I think that it's going to... Look, if work means to cause tremendous pain and suffering and sacrifice to people who are willing to do it, it'll work to some degree. I think ultimately in the marketplace of discourse, the truth always rises. I think that historically in this country, the more we try to repress secrets and the more we try to clamp down on activists, it comes out sooner or later. There was COINTELPRO, which began as a policy of surveillance and observation, which involved into the planned assassination and murder of political activists that occurred in this country. There was the Frank Church Commission's investigations in Congress in the 70s that involved the CIA and a whole series of illegal activities, including the importation of heroin in exchange for weapons. There have been countless examples where this government actually engages in violation of the law and then tries to suppress the truth. Sooner or later it comes out. The question is what we as citizens of this country and what we as citizens of this world are willing to do to hold our so-called leaders accountable, to expose them, to challenge them, and to bring them to justice.
Guys, I don't know if anyone else has got any questions. I was thinking...
Schism?
Tune of Barker and Blake.
Schism?
Yeah. Basically, I've got a couple of questions, actually. How do you feel regarding online protests now, since, obviously the PayPal 14 for Sabu situation, Barrett Brown, and LulzSec, obviously, in this country. How do you feel that has changed how Anonymous in particular do? Because it seems like, obviously I know how I feel, but it seems like it has affected the whole purpose of the whole sort of gearing up of online protests nowadays. It doesn't seem to happen as much. People seem to be a lot more worried about it. I mean, how do you feel about it?
Well, it's not by accident. There are a couple of reasons. Number one is I think that, what we call as the cottage industry of snitchism has evolved. Sabu is just, the tip of the iceberg. You've got increasing numbers. Whether or not there are increasing numbers of people cooperating with the NSA or New Scotland Yard or intelligence agencies all over the world, it really doesn't matter. Because the fact of the matter is more people think that's happening. And so that deters people from engaging in a whole course of conduct. And I'm not suggesting illegal conduct. I'm suggesting involved in just their own community. Number two, I think that, the governments of the world have banded together in their own self-interest in their drive to suppress this generation's move towards free speech and activism and organizing, and is really, as we talked about with Barrett, taking a sledgehammer out and hit a fucking flea. The stakes are great. The sacrifice is tremendous. The stress and strain is difficult. And I think more and more people are taking a closer look at how they can challenge the government and in ways that are new and evolving. Internet protest is perfectly legal. Internet protest is perfectly lawful. It doesn't violate the law. Where the law ends up being violated is when it, quote, and I'm not suggesting it's consistent with free speech notions, but where it breaks into or it begins to fold over into what the governments call as hacking. There is still a tremendous advantage to the internet for people to organize, to protest, through a variety of very creative ways. And yes, the challenges are greater and they are more difficult and more demanding than they've ever been.
I mean, to be honest, the word hacking has kind of become a bit like conspiracy theory in a sense. It's become a little bit of it's gained an extra meaning to it. Hacking is not illegal. It's become an almost a legal word. In the sense that when somebody's a hacker, everybody instantly thinks they're a criminal. The same way that everybody thinks a conspiracy theorist is a gook, right?
Well,
so, I mean,
I liken it to pornography. I mean, when the word pornography comes up, some people smile and laugh and say great, but a lot of people go, "Ooh, my God!" So, hacking, you're right, has sort of slipped its way into the vernacular of the world community, and it's not by accident. It is a systematic plan by law enforcement and by intelligence networks to take an entire generation of cyberspace activism, of people involved in protests through the internet, and criminalizing them by calling them hackers.
Yeah, completely. So, do you think? I mean, obviously, you spend a lot of time. I mean, you may not obviously spend a lot of time, but you obviously know a lot about what's going on within the Anonymous Collective. Obviously, because you've dealt with it in the past, and you do have ties to it, with certain things you do with Barrett Brown, etc. But do you think that Anonymous has become too public, in a sense where it's protesting better? Sorry,
I'll say to you what I said to the judge. Anonymous is anonymous. We are so used to hierarchical movements and structures where there are leaders, where there are groups, where there are collectives, where people take blood oaths. The very concept of a movement that is fluid, where people opt in, where they opt out, where they participate in operations, and they choose not to participate in operations, where people go in certain directions, it creates a tremendous problem for this government and law enforcement worldwide, because we're used to wrapping our arms around the 3 leaders, the 12 family heads, the guys that push the button and say, do it. That's what leads to the drone madness all over the world. So I can't certainly speak for Anonymous, because Anonymous is millions of people who decide to opt in and opt out. But I think you're right. I think people have made decisions as a loose-knit collective, and that may be sort of mutually inconsistent with one another, that there are changes evolving in how to deal with situations. I mean, the most recent and most successful and the most glorious example of the collectivism of Anonymous, as far as I'm concerned, occurred with the Israeli invasion and attack on Gaza several years ago, where Israel turned around and said, guys, we're shutting your shit down in 10 minutes, get your last message out. And a group of people from Anonymous who said they were from Anonymous said, not on our fucking watch. And they the communication of almost 2 million people alive. There's been an ongoing battle of exposing Zionist colonies. There's been an ongoing battle by Anonymous in participating in the Arab Spring and participating in resistance movements in the Middle East. That hasn't changed. And in many respects, that work is as critical as any other work that the movement's been involved with over the years. And my hat goes out to them. And I'm not suggesting that people do anything. I am, of course, speaking in the abstract, in the hypothetical, Mr. Holder, Attorney General of the United States. Heaven forbid I suggest that anyone would violate the law. I'm an officer of the court.
Very perfect comments there. Would you consider yourself anonymous?
Oh, I'm about as anonymous to the U.S. government as fucking John Dillinger was, I guess.
He's about as anonymous as I am.
Yeah, you know, I would say I've got a pretty high persona, but you know.
I mean in mindset.
You mean in mindset? Yeah, I believe very strongly. Look, I grew up in the 60s as a political activist. I fought against the Vietnam War. I fought in the Civil Rights Movement. I fought with American Indians, both in the United States and Canada. I was a community organizer. I was a legal aid attorney. I've spent 25 years since then representing political movements, political groups. I live in the Lower East Side of New York City. I represented, lived, worked, and conspired with, I guess, the squatter movement. You know, the theory of urban sociologists is that Black Bloc grew out of the squatter movement and that Occupy or Anonymous grew out of Black Bloc. I am a supporter of all resistance movements everywhere. I am a supporter of movements that come together, that challenge government, that expose government, that stand up against policies that need to be challenged. If that makes me anonymous, then I'm very much anonymous.
You don't need to fill out the form now, Stanley. Good work.
The only thing I wish I knew how to do is to turn on my fucking Skype.
We do have a form, but it's not for signing up. It's called a butthurt form.
No.
So if you get upset, you have to fill it in.
The reason I mentioned the protest thing was that it seems like, especially, I mean, in this country, obviously, because I know this country better than what happening in America. I mean, obviously, I see live streams, and I say so forth and so on, and speak to people from America and stuff. But in this country, especially with protests being quite public now, and the organisation of protests being quite public, it's become almost a sense where you turn up to your protest, and they've already set up the kettle. They've already set up a situation where they can hem you in to somewhere you can't be seen, and you can sit there and you can, you know, it's kind of like contained civil disobedience, because they already know what's going to happen before it happens, because it's been so public and all over the place.
Well, what's worse? I'm sorry.
And I just think sometimes it's Anonymous was in the beginning, back in the days. I mean, I've been around for quite a while now, but back in 2010. Towards the end of 2010, when our payback sort of starts spreading up, beginning of 2011, it was better because it came from nowhere, and it was a lot harder for people to deal with it, a lot harder for the authorities to deal with it, even though they dealt with it afterwards, mainly because of the use of Loic. But the fact that they weren't aware of the fact it was going to happen, which made it a lot more powerful. So I'm just thinking that, does protests need to change?
Well, no. Look, protests have to evolve. You have to be flexible. There's no one successful mode of protest. Resistance takes many forms. And I've taken this position in Palestine for decades. There are people who believe in armed struggle. There are people who believe in passive resistance. There are people who believe in throwing rocks. There are people who believe in voting. And now you've got the most effective movement outside of Palestine that we've had in decades is BDS. You have to be flexible. And it's funny when you talk about these cattle pens, what's worse about that when you show up at a demonstration is how many times do you show up and you've got people from quote unquote the movement directing people into the pens because they're working with law enforcement, and not just as informants, under the guise that we've got to make sure this is peaceful and disciplined and controlled. So you guys go here, and you guys go there, and you guys go here. And I'm not suggesting that anyone break any law or engage in any violence. But to answer your question, I think that, resistance and movements are evolving. They have to meet evolving, changing circumstances. They have to meet new needs. They have to meet new movements, new parties and priorities. And I have fundamental faith in the flexibility of our people, especially our young activists, to do that.
I've got something to ask of you, Stanley. We've discussed quite a bit on Barrett Brown. Barrett Brown has divided, if you like, Anonymous. A lot of people are very, shall we say, interested in the battleground case, or either for or against him, within the anonymous group, from the rhetoric that I've seen. What would you say to Anonymous on behalf of Barrett Brown and the work that he's done?
Look, people have to make their own decisions about Barrett Brown. I mean, Barrett and I are not old friends, and we're not old comrades, and we're not fellow travelers. I met him at a particular point in time. I had some discussions with him. We disagreed vigorously over certain facts and situations. I am certainly not in the position to suggest to Anonymous how they view Barrett Brown. I think there are members of Anonymous that view him as a train wreck. I think there are members of Anonymous that view him as a great hero. I think one thing can be said for sure, whether you like the guy, whether you hate the guy, whether you think he's a freedom fighter, or whether you think he's self-promoting, he has been singled out by the United States government in a way that very few other activists have in the last 10 to 15 years. Now, there are some who believe that's all part of this counterintelligence coup to develop some sort of, big rep for him. And I just think those are the same people that think that, Jimmy Hoffa's living in the fucking White House.
Well, he's not. I mean, I remember when Barrett did those videos, the 3 videos directed to the Robert Smith for the FBI. And I remember seeing the first one. And Barrett at the time was tweeting it out. And I remember tweeting him saying, this is a little bit, you could be asking for a little bit of a problem here. And he was going, no, watch the next 2. The next 2 are even better. And so, I think he's a funny guy. I mean, I've always had a bit of respect for Barrett because he's just funny. And I don't often always believe what he says, but anybody who's funny has got to be worth respect. But I think he knew what he was doing. And I think there's a definite problem within Anonymous and sometimes within activist groups that sort of grow very quickly.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
No. I've been fortunate. I have some very close friends and clients that have been involved in resistance for decades, 20, 30, 40 years. And what I've learned from them is flexibility, and you have to evolve, and you need staying power, and you need to go in with your open eyes. Your eyes have to be open. You have to understand if you're going after the beast, it's going to try to fuck you up. And I think, Anonymous and all other resistance movements have to understand flexibility, priorities. I had a godfather who was a famous trade union activist who taught me at a very young age that you have to be careful on when you go to the barricades. Because the first time you go to the barricades and you get beat, you're that much weaker. The second time, you're even less powerful. The third time, they don't even use fucking barricades anymore. So you've got to pick your battles wisely. You've got to pick your priorities. You've got to be flexible. And you've got to understand it's not a game. It's very serious, and the consequences are serious.
Yeah, totally.
Stanley, do you find, or have you found disparity in how the US Gov reacts to the cases that you take?
Yeah, it seems that every time I take a case, it all of a sudden, someone from the if it's a terrorism case, real or fake, and most of them are fake, people from Washington show up en masse. I mean, I just tried the Abu Ghraib case for 5 or 6 weeks, and there was a deputy attorney general from Washington, D.C., who all of a sudden hasn't probably set foot in the Southern District courtroom in her entire life. She, was camped out in the front row for weeks. When I take terrorism cases, or what are called terrorism cases, I very quickly see that representatives from the Department of Justice Counterterrorism Unit in Washington, D.C., and from the law enforcement agencies get involved very quickly. They play active roles. Look, all these cases are serious. Fortunately, I have a team of lawyers and support people and researchers and staff and folks that I bring in to handle these cases that are very creative, that are very dynamic, that are very selfless, and are very good at what they do. So we put a good fight up. But look, you can't be naive. I was just in UK doing Supergrass, Siddharth Badat, who has become the love of New Scotland Yard, who the United States rolls out every fucking terrorism case. And, this is a guy that was involved in 8 or 9 conspiracies to murder thousands of people all over the world. But all of a sudden, he's held hands and he's lit the candle and it's kumbaya and he's learned his lesson. So I was in UK literally cross-examining a witness in a secure location, and it was being telecast live back to a courtroom in New York City. And of course, New Scotland Yard was there, Old Scotland Yard was there, new FBI was there, the old fucking FBI was there, the drones were going around the fucking building. This is what you take these cases, they're serious. And they're not for the faint of heart, but on the other hand, you have to know what you're doing. You have to know how to try a case. You have to know how to defend the case. The politics are certainly part and parcel of the case. You have to have the ability to travel, to meet with people, and to understand. You don't want to start from scratch trying to figure out the Middle East on a terrorism case that's based exclusively in the Middle East. That's not to say that I'm the only one who has that ability, but there aren't a whole lot of us that have spent as many years as I doing this.
Stanley, where do you think you got your bollocks from for this undertaking?
My parents tell me the first word that I ever spoke was no. I am blessed that I grew up in a period of world change, where the 50s rolled over into the 60s, and we fought and resisted against age-old and ineffective policies. I was fortunate. I grew up in a time where young people by the millions took to the streets all over the world through a variety of tactics to fight against the war, to fight against government, to fight on behalf of civil rights, to fight and challenge orthodoxy, to try to break a new world, to try to mold a new world. And it gave me purpose and direction and meaning, and I haven't looked back. That was a long time ago.
So if, for instance, if the worst happens and you do kind of lose your license, who's Anonymous going to call when they have a problem?
Listen. I'll leave a checklist of lawyers. Look, there are lots of young lawyers coming up. There's a lot of ways lawyers affect change. There are lawyers that litigate. There are lawyers that fight in courtrooms. There are people that all over the world that don't have law degrees or that do have law degrees that are involved in human rights, that are involved in organizing, that are involved in speaking, that are involved in advising people in movements. I don't know what's going to eventually happen to my license. I've been doing this a long time. I suspect it'll turn out okay. I don't know whether I've reached a point in my career where whether the license stays or goes, I'm moving in different directions. I'm involved much more overseas than I have been the last few years than ever before. So to answer your question, if they come knocking at your door, there are more of us around than there were a few years ago, and somehow I have the suspicion that Anonymous will figure out where we are and how to get to us.
Yeah, just we often sort of in the past we've spoken about the fact that we don't seem to have a great deal of these sort of human rights lawyers in the UK. You never really hear about one that particularly stands out as somebody who sort of stands up for the activist as much as you have in the United States and so forth. So it's just one of those things that's always it's always been cool seeing you when you did the PayPal 14 and like with Top mentioned earlier with the We Are Legion film and stuff. It's good to see somebody who's standing up for people and their rights. Do you know what I mean? But you don't really see it in this country, and it's always something that I feel is kind of lacking in the UK, that we don't have someone your equivalent in this country.
Well, look, you got to start somewhere, and I suspect that of the millions of people that opt in, opt out, are involved in Anonymous one way or another, it involves law students, it involves young lawyers, it involves people that want to become lawyers. They need to get their degrees, they need to learn their skills, and they need to fight. There are more and more lawyers around that are willing to step up and to fight. I just think that we have to be more flexible in our reach and our approach. I was very fortunate to grow up at a time when there were lots of human rights activist lawyers that mentored me, that I worked with, that I struggled with, and they're still around. The PayPal 14 case had 24 lawyers, very committed lawyers, very experienced lawyers, different levels of political experience and background and commitment, but it was very much a collective effort. I know I get a lot of the benefit for the disposition and for the work, but it was a team of lawyers, women and men, who were committed to do all that we could to make sure that these 14 great young activists did not become just fodder for the machine.
That's what I was going to ask about, Stanley, in fact. Is there a healthy base of legal representation for activists in light of the charges and the situation that you're going through personally? Especially, not just the US, but your visit to Switzerland recently. I know you gave speeches. How was that received? But how is the legal representation and the legal field, shall we say, of your contacts? How is everyone feeling about the charges that are brought against you?
Well, there are. Look, I've been very fortunate over the years. I belong to a number of legal collectives of internationalists and lawyers and human rights activists. We've brought lawsuits against Israel and against the United States in the International Criminal Court, in The Hague. We've brought actions in Algeria, in Spain. We've brought actions in Paris. We've brought actions in London. We're working on actions against Egypt. There are lots of lawyers that I work with in Brussels and Paris and Spain. There's growing numbers of great young activist lawyers in South Africa, where I've just finished a case I was involved with the last several years. They're being very supportive and very helpful. I'm going to be doing more and more speaking as the summer progresses, meeting with human rights groups and lawyers in the Middle East, meeting with human rights groups and lawyers in Europe and elsewhere, working around not just my case, working around not just building solidarity, working around not just making sure that the judge before whom I am appearing understands, what this is really about, but there's work that still goes on. We've got lawsuits against companies, against countries, against individuals for war crimes, for crimes against humanity, for violation of the Geneva Convention that I'm involved with. So I'm comfortable that there are increasing numbers of lawyers. There's a defense committee that it's in its early stages. It's called the International Defense Committee for Stanley Cohen. But there are growing numbers of lawyers becoming involved in Brussels, in Paris, in South Africa, in Spain, perhaps in Switzerland. Look, ultimately, it's not about Stanley Cohen. This is going to go where it's going to go. It's not going to change me as a person. It's not going to silence me. It's not going to break my spirit or my resistance. I am prepared to fight and to fight on. There are bigger issues. There are more important aspects of the world community and the struggle we take. I am very appreciative of the outpouring of support I've received from throughout the world, from Anonymous, from other human rights organizations and groups. I'm upbeat, I'm optimistic, but I'm not naive. I understand that when you fight the U.S. government for 30 years, it comes for you. Okay, it has.
No, absolutely. And a further question. Do you think the guys that have been indicted, the guys that have been sent to prison, do you have any confidence in the U.S. government in the next political term? I don't know, say 4, 8 or 12 years. Do you think they're going to be looked back on as heroes? As, guys like Snowden, Chelsea Manning, are they going to be looked back on as heroes anytime soon?
Historically in this country, we have a tradition of, when I say we, I don't mean progressives, I don't mean human rights activists, I don't mean movements. I mean the body politic has a tradition of despising whistleblowers. And then when the dust settles years later, looking back and saying, you know, look what they fucking told us. Look what they showed us. They like to believe it makes us a better country, a better place, a better world. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. In the 70s, Frank Church, the senator, held these huge hearings in the Senate, which reined in, supposedly, the fucking CIA. And we know by the 90s, they reined in nothing. What it requires is constant vigilance, constant commitment, constant sacrifice, and constant struggle. And yes, I think history, world history, and I say this all the time, let history be the judge of me, and let history be the judge of movements, and let history be the judge of whistleblowers. And I'm confident that as we evolve and as we improve, and as the next generation takes its rightful place in the world community in terms of leadership and in terms of structuring how we evolve, that people sitting in jail right now will be looked upon as heroes. Look, Nelson Mandela was a fucking, terrorist for 27 years. He sat in prison for 27 years, and at the end of his life, you couldn't find a politician who didn't want to have a photo taken with him. Malcolm X was criminalized. His birthday was just the other day, and now he's a postage stamp. I mean, John Brown, when I was growing up, was a lunatic who's now a great hero. So history has a way of evolving and taking a look at circumstances. Unfortunately, there's a fine line between terrorism and freedom fighter in this world, and tragically, it's who wins. And all too often, great human beings, great fighters who, quote, lost, and lost is a relative term, are seen as terrorists, and people who are viewed as heroes were really criminals.
You now received a complimentary certificate. You're now a member of the group of Anonymous.
Ah! No wonder my butt hurts right now.
That's top.
Yeah, that'll be top.
It's affection.
We like to show the love.
I'll put it in my wallet next to my Hamas credit card.
The card's in the post, Stanley.
Yeah. I go through customs, and sometimes, especially with my older passport, I've got a new one now, the customs agents will start looking at my fucking passport, and Syria and Yemen and Egypt and Algeria and Turkey and Palestine and Lebanon and Lebanon and Lebanon and Lebanon. And they'll look at me and they'll say, do you mind us asking what you do? And I say, I franchise McDonald's.
Stanley, you're probably the only person on the planet that has a more difficult situation of getting to the US than Glenn Greenwald.
Well, listen, I understand that Glenn was living in Brazil because he was an enemy of the United States and the government was out to get him. And I said the other day, and I think some of his supporters got really pissed at me, I guess he's now come back to the United States because there aren't enough Barnes and Nobles in Brazil.
So, Stanley, if I may ask, what's the future? Where's this going?
I don't know. I could be very glib and say those of us who fail to learn the lessons of history are destined or doomed to repeat its mistakes. I'm optimistic. I think the evolution of cyberspace, I think the development of technology, I think the world becoming a smaller place, I think the ability to communicate with diverse cultures and peoples and religions and backgrounds, I think the willingness of people to stand up, to be counted, to resist, to fight, to throw themselves under the machine augurs well. I think we are heading towards a fundamental clean and clear break. Just as the 50s gave way to the 60s, I think we are on our way to good things in good times. I think it will be difficult. I'm not naive. I'm optimistic because I see everywhere in the world millions of young women and men who are willing to stand up and to fight back. And that gives me reason to be optimistic and to believe the future is bright. But I'm not naive. It's not easy. The powerful are not going to give up easily. We've got a corporate oligarchy stranglehold on the power in this country and in this world. People that are making billions of dollars, that are held that are not accountable, that are faceless and that are nameless. They are not going to go quietly into the night. But I am confident that there are enough of us to say to them, fuck you.
Good answer. Again, totally agree with you. You've worked with Occupy, or you know of Occupy, should I say, and you've worked with Anonymous per se. Where do you see the issues are in the short, medium, and long term?
Short term, I think that people have to, the movements are under siege, clearly, worldwide. Short term, people have to come together and they have to decide what it is they want, what it is they want to do, and where they want to go. Occupy at its heyday, it took off, it spread like wildfire throughout the world. And it's backed off for a variety of reasons. Some of it had to do with, systematic violence. Some of it had to do with people breaking off into other priorities. I think in the short run, it's important for people to make sure they maintain contacts, they maintain communities, they continue to build coalitions. In the middle run, I think it's important to identify challenges and issues and causes that can be challenged, that can be confronted, and that can be, overtaken. Long term, I think it's incumbent upon us to continue, as I like to look at myself in some ways, as making sure that the path for those coming up behind us, has leadership, has examples, that people understand that it's a support mechanism, that people understand that the tradition of resistance, the tradition of fighting back, the tradition of dissent is nothing new. It's as old as the ages. Every movement, every time, every generation has fought back in their own ways. And I think it's important that we pay homage to where we have come from and make sure that people understand that we have an obligation to those that are following us. So I think it's a question of reconsidering where we're at, identifying issues that we can successfully challenge and do so in ways that don't expose us unnecessarily. And long term is continue to build coalitions worldwide. I also think that the work that Anonymous and Occupy and Solidarity movements did and are continuing to do in the Middle East are invaluable, because I think we're now beginning to see an explosion or a similar movement or explosions in Africa. And I think we're going to see it also in Latin America. There's a revolution going on in Mexico right now, and most of the fucking world doesn't understand it. Mainstream media is not covering it. There are people that are retaking villages, that are retaking communities, that are retaking farms, and folks don't know about it. And so one of the most important things is to continue to grow small means of communications. We don't need any hip Rupert Murdochs. Russian TV plays a good role. And the new hip Rupert Murdoch, Glenn Greenwald media outlet I'm sure it'll play a good role. What we need is more and more bloggers, more and more international folks talking among themselves, serving as the eyes and ears. And I think in the short run, what it really means is we need to protect and defend journalists who are under siege in unprecedented ways, or being murdered and disappeared all over the world. If they're coming for people that are out there to spread the word and expose the harm, they're the front line of our resistance right now.
And so are the lawyers.
Well, listen, you know what? It's my choice between, if I had my choice between, lots of journalists or lots of lawyers, I'd prefer lots of journalists.
Right, Stanley, this is the money shot. It's been a great conversation with you and that, but at the end of the day, what free legal advice could you give to anyone that's going to undertake any activity against their government by way of information freedom?
I think, number one, that politicians have to be confronted. They have to be held accountable. I think particularly politicians from countries that are clearly involved in war crimes, such as Israel. When they come to visit, there's got to be demonstrations, they've got to be made uncomfortable, they've got to understand they're going to be held accountable. I think the movement of economic boycotts, which is proving so successful the BDS movement against Israel can spread against other countries, can spread against other corporate entities. I think that's important. I also think it's important to develop increasing bonds among and between resistance movements throughout the world. That doesn't necessarily require travel. It's done by communication. It's done by exchange of ideas. It's done by writing. And I also think it's important that we not fall for the age-old trap of embracing, the cult of personality. Now, I am not pointing my fingers at anyone in particular, or any persons in particular. There are golden calves. There are people, there are countries, there are ideals that somehow folks have difficulty challenging, confronting, questioning, and that includes Stanley Cohen, and I'm not a golden calf. I think it's important that people understand that resistance requires lots of women and men on a grassroots level, organizing in their local communities, building coalitions, and fighting back.
Beautiful. Beautiful words. Guys, I'm done with my cross-examining of the legal representation of Anonymous. I don't know if you guys have any more questions.
Excuse them?
I think I've covered it pretty much.
Well, I want to thank you guys. This has been wonderful. And when the New Scotland Yard kicks your fucking door down tonight and charges you with conspiracy because you spoke with me and allowed me to talk to people in the country, we'll have to find you a legal fund.
They're going to find counsel. Stanley, they're going to come through my window.
Discount.
Yeah, we'll find you some guys. No worries.
Sound. I already know a good barrister. So I'm told.
I don't know what crime she's been committing.
Who, me? No, she's on my Facebook. She's a very
I
interesting
committed the crime of actually downloading Skype for this.
Delete it afterwards, eh? White computer and start again.
Don't worry.
I want to thank you for my honorary butthurt today.
You're welcome.
And I want to thank you for the opportunity to be the first guest on this new, wonderful, and critically important media outlet. And I wish you lots of success.
It's just a crazy idea that some daft idiot had online and just thought he'd go with it. Sometimes you just got to go with it. If it fails, it fails. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And if it doesn't, all success to it then and everybody who's helping out, because it's not just everybody together. It's just like trying to make it work. So we all just struggle along together, and I'll just try and run the tech blindly.
Listen, it's not. We talk about this. 300 years ago in the United States, the lunatic stood on a street corner and handed out pamphlets and screamed, fight back, fuck these people. And people either took the leaflets or they didn't. They walked on. And then it evolved into, mom and pop printing presses. And then it evolved into sit-ins. And now it evolved to lots of people getting on board with computers and televisions and cyberspace and terms and processes. I have no fucking idea what it means or how to use them. It's evolving, it's critical, it's essential, and, up the rebels.
Exactly.
And Stanley, being sorry to take up airtime for personal selfish endeavour, but if you're in contact with any of the lawyers for Barrett Brown, Chelsea Manning, or Edward Snowden, can you relay my utmost gratitude to the sacrifices these guys have made?
I will. I shall. There's a rumor that there's some sort of, with some of the lawyers and I have had some friction over the years, but believe me, I have nothing but the utmost respect for the women and men that take these cases, that handle these cases, and fight these cases. And I know, even though, I've been accused of, taking liberties with certain of the golden calves, it's all one community, it's all one struggle. We need to grow, we need to fight. And I will certainly convey to the attorneys your respect, your love, and your solidarity.
Much appreciated. It's very deep felt. I've watched what these guys have gone through, and I would do the same. I just haven't had the opportunity that these guys have been able to make sacrifices for. So thank you for conveying that for me.
I shall. Thank you.
Excellent. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort my tech out this side and see if I can make it just without mashing it up and smashing it up together. So I'll drop the call, and thank you very much, Stanley, for joining us tonight, okay?
I appreciate it. It was a great opportunity, and as I said before, up the Rebel and my love to everyone overseas.
Much love to you, bro. Take it easy, guys. Thank you very much, Top and Schism. Catch you later.
Adios.
Take care. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
There they go, folks. There's Stan, activist, a lawyer, attorney. Well, let's see if we can get this working.
We are Legion.
And
United as
something for the
one.
radio.
Divided
Right,
by
fucking cat.
zero. We do not forgive censorship. We do not forget oppression. You are sad. Expect us. Hello, citizens of the world. We are anonymous. Legion. We are anonymous. Expect us.
You felt it your entire life, that there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. Do you know what I'm talking about? The Matrix. The Matrix is everywhere. It is all around us. Even now, in this very room. You can see it when you look out your window, or when you turn on your television. You can feel it when you go to work, when you go to church, when you pay your taxes. It is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth. What truth? That you are a slave, Neo. Like everyone else, you were born into bondage. You were born into a prison that you cannot smell or taste or touch. A prison